just crossed a terrible threshold, Arthas.
So you're breaking up with me because I'm too blonde?
Your paladin will either die at level 2 when a goblin accidentally crits, or live long enough to see themselves become lawful stupid. That is the sad and inevitable career trajectory of most paladins. It's basically because we can't get past this one fundamental question. What the hell is good anyway? Paladins are the class that is lawful good, and the lawful part is really easy. We all live under the law, we know what it means to be lawful. But good? Dude, we have been arguing about what the good is for over 2,000 years, and we need to have it solved as a prerequisite for playing this class in a game about dragons? Are you kidding me? Let's talk about anime. The first 5 episodes of the 2021 anime, The Faraway Paladin, present one of the most earnest and well-told paladin origin stories I've ever seen. The show has a pretty edgy elevator pitch. This is a show about a paladin raised from birth by the undead. But it's not quite like that. Most paladin stories are pretty dark in tone, but not this one. The Faraway Paladin is a very sincere story. Also, the main character is named William, and none of you have any idea how immersive this show is for me. Wow! Anyway, baby William Merryblood arrives in a dead city, surrounded by a ghost, a skeleton, and a mummified priestess. The trio begin to tutor the young William, and to their surprise, he's pretty much the most determined little critter they've ever laid eyes on. The talented child and the undead begin to form an informal family, with the priestess Mary and the skeleton Blood finding themselves drifting into the roles of mother and father. But they aren't telling William everything. William isn't sure how much he can trust his necromantic family, and eventually follows Mary into the shrine where he was forbidden to go. Mary kneels before the altar, cast ablaze in holy fire. In a panic, William tries to protect his adopted mother, but only succeeds in badly burning himself. When he wakes up later, Blood and Mary explain that Mary, being undead, burns when she prays to her goddess. She's been praying every single day to receive communion bread for William's meals, despite her estrangement in undeath from her deity. The boy apologizes for breaking his family's trust and requests to join Mary every night in prayer. The years pass, and his family informs him that he should swear an oath to a deity when he comes of age soon. The stronger and more binding the oath, the greater the power it will offer him as a paladin. The day finally arrives that William comes of age. It's a happy moment. They're overwhelmingly proud, and they prepare to send him off into the world. But there's a problem. The 3 undead, former heroes in life, were here in this shattered city for a reason. There's a sword that once belonged to a demon king, and the undead had remained behind to prevent it from falling into the demon king's hands once again. But their deal with Stagnate, the god of undeath, was to linger here until they'd lost their purpose. But raising William, training him, and preparing him for greatness had become their new purpose. And now, their task was done, and Stagnate comes to claim his new soldiers. They fight off the god's avatar for now, but William's family is fading fast, and Stagnate will soon return. And then, it's just William, alone, fighting against a dark god for the fate of his family's souls. He's alone. But he doesn't have to be. He's already lived his life having sworn an oath to himself, an oath as binding as one to any god. William will not be a walking corpse. He's going to live his life with every ounce of energy he has. He'll love the people around him, even when they lie to him, when they keep secrets, or when they try and hurt him. It's not easy. It's never easy, but that's the oath he's tried to live by. And would it be so bad to swear that same oath to a goddess. And when William swears his vows as a paladin, it's not just words. It's not something he just starts doing so that he can become a paladin. He isn't a good man who is choosing to live this way so that he can be blessed by a deity. William is a good man who has received this blessing because he chose to live this way. The love he feels and the care he's found in his family didn't make him like this. He built this love and this life by doing something difficult. He built it by choosing to be good as often as he could. He made mistakes, he lost his temper, but he never let it stop him from finding his way back to his oath. In my opinion, when William bends the knee before the goddess Gracefeel, and she tells him he's got all the right stuff, he doesn't become a paladin. She just acknowledges that he's already been one for years. Hello, it's me, the god William SRD, and you meet all of the requirements to become one of my paladins. And if you would like me to acknowledge your status as a paladin, then you need only take the oath by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Did you do it? Good. Then arise, paladin. When we sit down at the table and write the word paladin at the top of our character sheet, we don't often end up with a character like William Merryblood. Frankly, I think we're all a little bit too jaded. The world is a very complicated place, and everything feels way too muddled to be able to live like the Faraway Paladin. I mean, look, come on, this is clearly not a realistic show. The Paladin is a trope that we see over and over in role-playing games, but we don't very often see it or equivalents of it as the leading character in media. I think we become lawful stupid because we don't really believe in lawful good. It doesn't resonate with us and the society we live in. It's no coincidence that the most famous paladin in fiction is a much more cynical tale. Prince Arthas Menethil is a knight of the Silver Hand, a paladin of the light. Arthas heads north to assist his longtime crush, Jaina Proudmoore, to investigate a mysterious plague that has begun gripping the lands of Lordaeron. Arthas and his force soon find themselves slogging through infected villages, the plague victims transformed into a violent undead scourge. After some investigation, he and Jaina track the plague back to a shipment of infected grain from the city of Anderhall. After journeying to Anderhall and defeating the necromancer Kel'Thuzad, they learn that they arrived too late. Countless shipments of plagued grain have already been delivered all across Lordaeron. Jaina sets out to bring Arthas' mentor, Uther the Lightbringer, and his paladins to the front line, while Arthas remains behind to guard the town of Hearthglen, learning soon after that the citizens of Hearthglen have already been infected. When Uther finally arrives, Arthas and his army are on the brink of oblivion. The scourge is destined to wipe out the kingdom, and a mysterious prophet warns Arthas that the only solution to protect his remaining people from the plague is by fleeing across the sea. Arthas denies this, believing it to be cowardice, and insisting that he'll fight the plague to the bitter end. When their force arrives at the gates of the largest city of the region, Stratholme, they realize at once that they're too late. The entire city has already consumed the grain. They just haven't turned yet. You know that moment in zombie shows where someone's been bitten and everyone has this moral dilemma of if it's okay to kill them before they turn and put others in danger? Well, that's the choice that Arthas faces, but with an entire city of infected innocents that's days away from spilling out beyond its walls to slaughter the rest of the kingdom. And Arthas, out of options, makes the only call he feels he can.
This entire city must be purged.
What?
He holds himself to this awful necessity, even when Uther and Jaina balk at his cold, callous logic. The city is culled by Arthas' own sword, with the demon behind the plague, Mal'Ganis, fleeing to the frozen continent of Northrend. From here, Arthas' story takes a turn for the worse. Shell-shocked and consumed with guilt and fury from what happened in Stratholme, the prince charges headlong into the bitter cold of Northrend, every awful decision making the next a little easier. He burns his ships to prevent his men from returning home before the task is done. Seeking more power to take vengeance on Mal'Ganis and protect his kingdom, Arthas takes up an ancient blade, Frostmourne, giving up his soul in the bargain. And when Arthas comes out on top of the struggle, no longer a paladin, but a soulless knight, he takes his place atop a frozen throne. He is no longer the Prince of Lordaeron. He is the Lich King. There is a difference in attitude between these two stories. The tale of a boy finding comfort in an oath, versus a prince fighting evil so single-mindedly that he loses himself to it. Now, we do have a bit of a societal thing going on right here, undeniably. There is a lot to be fairly critiqued with Japanese pop culture, but one thing we all have to admit is that they aren't averse to sincerity in the same way that we are. Whereas we English speakers have reached such a level of insincerity and hyper-sarcasm that we've started to need to invent words like post-irony and meta-irony, and have them not just be random gobbledygook like they actually mean something pretty fundamental if you want to speak to entire generations of people. Basically what I'm trying to say is, which way, Western man? Our collective ideas of paladins and what they look like looks a lot closer to Arthas Menethil than it does to William Maryblood. We see them as these devout slayers of evil, yet it was that exact definition and path that led Arthas down the road to becoming the Lich King. To most of us, the simple goodness and sincerity in the Faraway Paladin might sound better to us, but we don't really feel like it's realistic. And in our heads, it's like, doesn't it just feel closer to reality if I'm just Judge Dredd with holy powers? Besides, what good can sincerity do us in an awful world? The works of photographer Ansel Adams exemplifies this particular conundrum. He was one of the major figures in the process of photos being seen as art in the 20th century. He is best known for his work in landscape photography, which was his pride and joy. Imagine for a moment that you've just scaled a mountain in a national park. You feel that cold chill on your skin. Your lungs are sore, but you can't quite let yourself rest until you've seen what you came here to see. You stand before the glorious vista at the top of the world and you see this. All of this. It's bigger and greater than you or I or any of us or anything we can hope to accomplish. And you just feel so awed that you have been given the opportunity to just see it. That is what it feels like to chew 5 gum, and also to look at the works of Ansel Adams. It's an uncomplicated body of work. It's beautiful. It evokes wonder. But that's kind of it. Ansel had a sincere love of nature, and he wanted to share it. But many at the time felt that sincerity just wasn't enough. Ansel Adams lived through the turbulent eras of the 20th century, and it didn't sit right with many of his fellow photo artists that millions of people were being turned to mulch in the Second World War, and Ansel Adams was still quietly taking pretty and uncomplicated pictures of trees. And when he finally did try to make a statement with his photography, which was essentially his attempt to take photos of interned Japanese Americans to try and help humanize them to the nation, he accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, made the camps look like a gorgeous suburban paradise. I do actually think that sincerity is a very important missing ingredient in Paladins that we have not been playing with very often. I have actually never sat down at a D&D table with a lawful good Paladin player who wasn't attempting to critique or subvert the trope. And it's all well and good to have those intentions as the player, but the important thing to remember is that your Paladin is not you. Your Paladin really does believe in these oaths. If they did not sincerely believe in good, they would never have taken this oath. So if you wish to avoid being lawful stupid, the very first thing you need to do is to devote your Paladin to sincerely desiring to not merely erase evil, but to doing good. But as we've seen with our real-life example of Ansel Adams, sincerity is not enough to account for the evil in the world, and it does nothing to correct it. How can we believe in our paladins when we live in a world that mass-produces Lich Kings? I didn't tell you everything about the Faraway Paladin. There's a detail that almost feels unimportant on first viewing, but after rewatching, I think it means everything. The Faraway Paladin is an Isekai. For the uninitiated, Isekai is a Japanese term that refers to stories in which characters from our world are transported into fantasy worlds. Most often, it's the protagonist, for obvious storytelling reasons. William Merryblood is the reincarnation of a human from our world, born into the body of a baby. The memories are foggy. He doesn't remember his old name, he doesn't remember his old life, but he does remember that he wasted it, that he was a burden to everyone around him, and that when his parents died, with him having accomplished nothing of note, he fell into an even deeper despair. These memories of a life gone wrong follow William into his new one. William's drive to sincerely do good doesn't come from being sheltered in a loving home. It comes from failure and despair. William tries harder than anyone else to do good and to do right by the people around him because he believes himself to be worthless. And the most surprising thing happens. Despite all that he lived through in his first life, despite the interference from an evil god in his new one, William finds that it doesn't matter if he's a good man or not. Choosing time and time again to make the difficult choice to do what's right is enough to be happy. Not only that, but it's a requirement for living without it being a living death. And if it doesn't always go right, that's okay, because the world isn't in his control, but his own soul is. He felt his last life was a walking on death, and he's chosen to live a shorter, more painful life this time, if it means truly living. The actions he takes, the love he shows to the people around him, all those things reflect into him, and they are what make him a paladin. There's no such thing as an essentially good person or an essentially bad person. This is a trap we fall into believing all the time. Someone does something bad, and we say it doesn't count because they're a good person. Or we partake in or justify evil when we believe it's being done against evil people or evil groups. Plato says that justice is treating everyone how they ought to be treated, treating good people well and bad people badly. But I don't think he actually accounted for the effects that treating people badly would have on you while you do them. It's ineffective to go through life believing people are good or bad. There's only good and bad behavior, and you can always change yours. William lived a whole terrible life without doing the right thing, and he still was able to turn it around. The culling of Stratholme is a tragedy for more people than just the citizens, but also for Arthas. It's tempting to interpret this event as a good man doing a bad thing to achieve a good outcome, but that's just not true. In fact, a paladin should reject that there is even such a thing. Arthas' actions in Stratholme began a cycle within himself. He was a hero who had done a bad thing to stop a bad guy, and that just made it easier to do the next bad thing, and so on and so forth. Like William Merryblood, who did good things until he became a force for good, Arthas did bad things until he became a force for evil. The initial good he did by halting the plague ended up being worthless, as the undead returned with Arthas at the head of their host. There are no good men doing bad deeds for the greater good, because they will very soon after become the new bad guys doing bad deeds for bad reasons. Mal'Ganis may have started the plague, but that evil made Arthas do his own evil, that began a long cycle ending in malevolence. And if you're caught up on World of Warcraft lore, the cycle of evil Mal'Ganis started has continued to roll on after 20 years of storytelling.
No crown, no throne, not even a soul left for judgment. I hated you, hunted you, and with each selfish act, became you.
We tell ourselves that morality is complicated, and it is, but not all the time. I've heard nutritionists say in interviews that we probably don't need to focus as much on awareness of what food is and isn't healthy, because that's not necessarily the problem. If you put an apple and a chocolate cake in front of me, I know which one's the healthy one, but I tell you what, I'm still gonna struggle. Like with ethics, it's so rarely the case of confusion so much as it is one of determination. And whether or not you believe that you are strong enough to overcome these moral obstacles, your paladin must be able to. Paladins need to be the versions of ourselves that can fight against these flaws. Being a paladin is about ending evil through personal sacrifice, even if the sacrifice is as something as small as patience, or letting go of their anger. In fact, that's the majority of what they need to do. That is the oath. Everyone else can tell themselves that the ends justify the means, that it was a tough time back then. We had to make those hard calls, or that morals aren't practical. But a paladin knows that in the end, the karmic wheel always comes back around in our never-ending cycle of evil. Good people become bad people to stop worse people, and then a new generation of good people become bad to try and fix it, because we've told ourselves that these are the only tactics that work, over and over. We've been playing this game for thousands of years. So what is a paladin? What does it mean to treat good as law? A paladin must be the sort who can stand before a no-win situation and resolve to add no evil to the world, whatever the outcome. Chance of failure doesn't factor into what's right, for in the long term, evil cannot be defeated through evil means, and a paladin's war is never against a singular evil. To play a paladin is to be a character who can stare down the leviathan of mortal sin, this awful morass of deeds and revenge built up over millennia, to stand before the unceasing cycle of evil and to be able to say that this cycle ends with you. You will defend the defenseless. You will guide those that need redemption, and you will be patient to those who would do evil unto you. For your enemies must be systems and cycles, not people. Come what may, you will do no evil, because that is the only way it can be defeated. Why are there so many RPG horror stories? What is it about these games that cause us to feud so much with our friends? Only one comic book understands D&D enough to answer the question, and dive deep into the psyche of role-playing nerds. If you want to know more about the most horrifying D&D comic book and why you need to read it, then click on this video. And if you want more content from me, then take a moment to hit subscribe. I'm putting out TTRPG video essays every 2 weeks from now until my brain literally shuts down, so I hope to catch you in the next one.